What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Today we're going to kick off our start-sit videos here for 2022 fantasy football with the running back position, and it's going to be a mother banger today because we have a lot of information that's going to be coming to you in a short amount of time, but don't worry, there's timestamps down below. If you're looking for certain matchups, hit the like button for timestamps here in season. But maybe you don't really understand what our start-sit videos are all about. A lot of new people here in the community. Let me explain it real quick. There are a lot of other fantasy outlets that will have their starts or sits of the week. That's great. That's cool. 5 or 10 players. It may not affect your team at all, and you just waste your time watching it because you don't got any of those players. Over here, every fantasy viable player in every game, every week, all season long, you're going to find information on players on your team in these videos, so hit that subscribe button now. Like I said, we have timestamps down below, but I gotta do a giveaway real quick. Now, one of the last things we did in the preseason was I gave away Kyle's YouTube plaque, right? He gave away my Chubb jersey, eye for an eye. I took Kyle's 100,000 subscriber plaque, we autographed it, and I'm gonna ship it to somebody. I've randomly selected a winner from that video, and it's none other than Zothamus. Zothamus said, "Oh man, that YouTube plaque would look nice next to my champ trophy from last year. Ship defending. Appreciate all the content. Another banger." Zothamus, hit me up with an email at info@thefantasyheadliners.com from that account right there, and I'm going to hook you up with that autographed plaque. But now is the time everybody's been waiting for. It's week 1 of the NFL season. It's Thursday Night Football. It's the kickoff of the season. It's the Buffalo Bills and the Los Angeles Rams. And right off the bat here, you can see the graphics looking a little bit sexy. Throw a hashtag Tay down in the comment section if you like what Taylor has built for us here. It looks a little bit different. What we're going to do this year is look at all these players really in 5 different categories: production, volume, matchup, injury concerns, X factor. We're going to give them a score, and there along the bottom of the screen, you can kind of see a confidence scale of where that actually puts them when we're talking about being a start or a sit. Are they a smash start? Are we a little bit worried about it? Try to alleviate some of those questions for you here early in the week. So when we're looking at this matchup between the Buffalo Bills, Los Angeles Rams, let's start on the Buffalo Bills side of things. We got Devin Singletary and we got James Cook. Now, a lot of unknowns here, right? When we're looking at production, Singletary ended the season pretty hot, right? But how is it going to look now with James Cook in the mix? When we go down to volume, same type of thing, right? We would like to think that, hey, Devin Singletary is going to get all that early down work and the goal line. But we really can't say that. He averaged under 12 touches a game just last season, so we don't expect the volume to really increase since they added a piece. James Cook still sitting as a 1 because we haven't really seen how they're going to utilize him weekly. As the shows go on throughout the week and we start to get more and more averages, we'll be able to paint a picture based off of real life stats and metrics at the time of that week, right? So we're not going to have to kind of foreshadow maybe like we do here in week 1. As far as matchup, not the easiest of matchups. They're going up against the Los Angeles Rams. We already know there's a ton of playmakers on the defensive side of the football. They only allowed just over 11 fantasy points per game last season. That was 8th fewest in the NFL. Can we look at this defense and really say they're that much worse than last year? No, probably still top 10 against opposing running backs, so they're only going to get 2 points here in this metric. As far as injury concerns, neither one of these guys really have anything affecting them. X factor, I got to give the edge slightly to James Cook only for the big playability in the passing game, right? A screenplay, James Cook could take 76 yards to the house. I don't know how many times we really see that opportunity with, damn it, Devin Singletary here this year. So James Cook going to get the slight edge. However, overall, both these guys falling below the 15-point threshold right there in the middle of the meter. So they're going to qualify as a sit for me here this week. How about on the Rams side of things? Cam Akers. And either you love Cam Akers or you are terrified of Cam Akers. There is nothing really in between here this year. Now, I don't hate Cam Akers. I'm just worried about him here this year. So when it looks at production, he's going to get a 3 in this category. He needs heavy volume because he's not overly efficient. He only averaged 2.5 yards per carry in the playoffs. I know he was coming off a torn Achilles, but we haven't really seen him play since. And until we do, kind of going to throttle it back just a little bit. Volume, I don't see them giving him 20 to 25 touches a week, each and every week. Last year, the Rams averaged right around 23 rush attempts per game, 26th in the NFL. They were throwing the ball a lot. Maybe the injury to Matthew Stafford's elbow leads to a little bit more running, but is it only going to be Cam Akers? It could also be Darrell Henderson, and what is that split going to look like? In a matchup against the Buffalo Bills, they allowed last year right around 17.8 fantasy points per game, middle of the pack. They added Von Miller. That could help out things just a little bit. Got him as a 3. Injury concerns, a 3 as well. Not just so much Cam Akers, but it's Matthew Stafford, who should be good to go. He should be playing. He should be throwing the ball down the field. But any kind of inconsistencies in the passing game could lead defenders to kind of stack the box and take away some of the upside for Cam Akers. X factor, it's a 4. We saw the volume in the playoffs. If for whatever reason that volume returns, we could see huge numbers from Cam Akers. He's going to have, scoring opportunities in the red zone. An offense which we know is going to be high-powered could get him a lot of goal line carries as well. We're tempering expectations to kind of start the season, giving him a total of 15, but still classifying as a start. Which will take us down to Sunday football now. The New Orleans Saints, Atlanta Falcons. First up, Alvin Kamara. Now, when we look at production, he finished 5th overall in fantasy points per game scored just last season. It's a new head coach. Michael Thomas is back now. They have Jarvis Landry. They drafted Chris Olave. It's not just Alvin Kamara in this offense anymore. Sure, the volume has been there. New Orleans has averaged over 27 rush attempts per game, but Mark Ingram's still going to be in the mix. It is a plus that we get some of that pass work going the way of Alvin Kamara, but maybe that target share takes a slight decrease with now the added weapons in the offense. The matchup, though, pretty freaking good. Atlanta's defense is not great. They allowed over 19 fantasy points per game to running backs last year. Didn't really do anything this offseason to improve that, so I don't expect it to be much more difficult here for the Saints this week. Injury concerns, it's a 4. Michael Thomas, what's he going to be out there? There's so many questions surrounding Michael Thomas and what is he really going to be on the field. If you're a Saints fan, you expect numbers from like 5 years ago. If you're a realist, you probably expect a little bit less than that. What about Jameis Winston? He's coming off the torn ACL. How does he move in the pocket? How does this offense look with him and a new head coach? X factor? Like I said earlier, he's no longer the only show in town. Now, I love Alvin Kamara and what he can do on the football field, but he has thrived for years based off of huge volume. If that volume takes a hit at all, and he's not getting the scoring opportunities, he's not relied on overly in the passing game because they have a healthier Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, Taysom Hill's a tight end, this year. There's so many other options in this offense. It just makes you question things a little bit here. Now, obviously, he's going to be a start, 21 points, falling into the start category. For Cordero Patterson, not so much. I have him as a sit this week. Production, he averaged right around 13 fantasy points per game in 2021, but it's going to be a change in a role here this year. He's not going to see the same type of opportunities in 2022 that he saw in 2021, right? They've added Bryan Edwards. They've drafted Drake London, Kyle Pitts now in his second year. He averaged close to right around 14 touches a game in 2021, but that's definitely going to be something that I could see falling closer to that 10, 11 range potentially. Matchup, super difficult. Going up against the Saints last year, they were the number 1 run defense in the NFL against opposing running backs, allowing only 13.9 fantasy points per game. Not a great matchup for the Atlanta Falcons here. Injury concerns, really none on this side of the football for Cordero Patterson. And X factor got him down as a 2 because he's not going to catch anybody by surprise this year, maybe like he did last year. The change in the offense, the additional weapons this year. I love Cordero Patterson. He's going to be a weekly flex for you at some time this year, but hopefully not in week 1. Which will take us out to Carolina now for the Cleveland Browns, Carolina Panthers, and a pretty easy matchup to kind of know what you're doing. If you have Chubb, McCaffrey, you're starting them. Depending on how many flexes you start, you more than likely start Kareem Hunt as well. When it comes to production, though, we kind of expect a similar split in touches once again with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Chubb's usually right around 17 touches a game, where Hunt is right around 12 touches per game. Not bad volume. It really comes down to who scores the touchdowns in this offense. There have been times in the past that once they get in the red zone, Kareem Hunt is the guy that's used. But why is that? It's because Nick Chubb busted off a big run and got them there in the first place. So sometimes you kind of just have to trade off some of these things. It's horrible at times if you're a Nick Chubb owner, but overall, great production, great volume there from him. The matchup, not bad either. Carolina allowed over 18 fantasy points per game just last season. Expect them to be somewhere in the similar neighborhood. No injury concerns for either of these guys right now, which is great. And then the X factor, got to give it by a hair to Kareem Hunt due to his involvement in the passing game and once they get inside the red zone. But we know this offense is going to be very run heavy. No Deshaun Watson under center. Jacoby Brissett is not going to be throwing the ball 40, 45 times a game each and every week. They're going to rely heavily on Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They're both starts. For Christian McCaffrey, you drafted him in the first round, and you're starting him 100% week one. That is not a question. If it was, maybe you shouldn't have played fantasy football this year. When it comes to production, it's a 5. Dude plays, he scores 20-plus fantasy points. Volume, it's a 5. If he plays, he gets you right around 20 touches a week at least. Matchup, not the easiest. Going up against Cleveland, they allowed just about 17 fantasy points per game, which was 21st last season, but they do have some playmakers up front. No injury concerns as of yet. And then the X factor, gotta be a 5, right? This guy is involved in every facet of the offense in Carolina, and now with Baker Mayfield under center, could get some checkdowns going his way as well. Love Christian McCaffrey this week. He's a smash start once again. And now we head up to the Windy City for the Chicago Bears, San Francisco 49ers. And on the 49ers side of things, I love me some Elijah Mitchell here this week. Now, when it comes to production, he averaged right around 13 fantasy points per game, which was top 20 overall just last season. He also touched the ball a lot, averaging over 20 touches per game. We know Trey Sermon is gone, and Jeff Wilson Jr., when he's healthy, is really just going to get the scraps. They are 100% right now committed to Elijah Mitchell. So now we just need to keep him on the field because it's a great matchup going up against the Chicago Bears. They lost Akeem Hicks. They lost Khalil Mack. This is a defense that can be had on the ground, and it's an offense in San Francisco that likes to utilize the run game. In fact, I'm going to head over to Prize Picks right now, and I'm going to smash the over on Elijah Mitchell's rushing prop, which is currently set at 64.5 yards. Smashing the over on that. Make sure you head over to Prize Picks. We're going to match your deposit up to $100. Come and play with us here this year. Let's make some extra money on Prize Picks. Just make sure you use that referral code Headliners when you do so and when you sign up for that new account. Now, injury concerns, he's been dealing with a sore hamstring, I guess you could say, here over the last couple of weeks, but he sounds like he's going to be good to go here. I think if they were overly worried, maybe they don't release Trey Sermon. Obviously, they feel comfortable with him here this year. And the X factor, this dude has it. An RPO run game with Trey Lance plus the volume that he gets. I absolutely love it. He got the volume even when he played with Trey Lance in a very small sample size last year. I'm not worried about that whatsoever. I'm going to start Elijah Mitchell. For David Montgomery, it's a lot closer. I'm not overly excited about David Montgomery. Sure, the production is there at times, but he barely averaged over 12 fantasy points per game last year. And that was with him getting close to 20 touches per game. Just not getting the scoring opportunities that he really needs to put him over the top. And then you add in the fact this is a very difficult matchup. Going up against the San Francisco 49ers, one of the best in the NFL against opposing running backs last year, only allowed 14 fantasy points per game, third fewest. Health really isn't a concern here. But the X factor isn't exciting me either. He's kind of, I guess he's been in the doghouse in this offense. I don't know. Is he going to play special teams? Is he going to be on the trading block at some point? A lot of questions surrounding David Montgomery. I'm hoping you don't overly rely on him week one. He's sitting at 15 points, which is right on the line as a start, but I don't have that warm fuzzy here on the inside. But speaking of warm fuzzies, I love this matchup of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Cincinnati Bengals. Start off with Najee Harris. Now, production, dude was top 10 in the NFL last year in points per game, averaging over 15 fantasy points per contest. The volume was there. He touched balls a lot, over 22 touches per game in 2021. The matchup, not overly bad. Cincinnati allows right around 18 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Injury concerns. I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it is, but he did miss a large chunk of the preseason, kind of got in there late, and they do expect him to play and start. So that's not really a worry, but is he limited at all? Does he have any rust from not playing much football over the last month and a half or so? That worries me a little bit, so I've dropped him down to a 2 in the injury concerns. He did have a sprained Lisfranc. For all of you that don't know what that is, a fractured Lisfranc, which would basically be the next step up from this, is what made us lose Travis Etienne all of last year. So still kind of a concerning injury. X factor though, how different is this offense now with no Big Ben? Do they check down a lot less this year than we've seen maybe last year with Big Ben? Are they trying to be more vertical down the field? Do they limit some of Najee's touches to work him back up, into the flow of the game? Just a lot of questions here. Still going to be a start for sure. You took him in the first round. You're starting your studs in week 1, falling in here with 19 points for Joe Mixon. A lot easier of a start for sure for me. He averaged the 4th most fantasy points of all running backs just last year with over 17 fantasy points per game. He averaged over 20 touches per contest, a matchup going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers who allowed over 21 fantasy points per game last year to opposing running backs. Expect that number to maybe get a little bit better, but still flirting with that 18 to 20 points per game, which was 6th most last year. Injury concerns? None as of right now. The offensive line is much improved in Cincinnati from last season. There's just so many weapons in this offense. They don't need to overly rely on Joe Mixon each and every week. So that X factor going to be dropped down a little bit. Plus, I don't really expect them to have a huge lead and they just run the ball the whole second half. I think this game, an interdivisional game with the Steelers, is a lot closer than maybe some people think, and maybe they kind of sprinkle in Joe Mixon, time and again, but not overly reliant on him here this week. So now we'll head up to Detroit, which is where Kyle is going to be watching the game against the Philadelphia Eagles. For the Eagles, it's a mess of a backfield. We're really only going to touch on Miles Sanders here right now. When it comes to production, not a whole lot. Only averaging right around 8.7 fantasy points per game in last year's system. Volume-wise, really saw the ball just about 13 times a game or so in the games that he played. Now the matchup, not overly bad, going up against the Detroit Lions, who allowed over 20 fantasy points per game just last season, 4th most in the NFL. Another one of those numbers that I expect to get maybe a little bit better, but still hovering right around 18 to 20 points per game allowed as well. Injury concerns? Always somewhat of an injury concern with Miles Sanders. He should be good to go. He's missed some time here as of late with a hamstring issue. They're saying he's good, but they're also saying they're going to utilize multiple backs. The X factor just isn't there. They're not committed to anyone in this backfield. You got Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, now Trey Sermon in the mix. He got 12 points, and he's going to be a sit until we see how they handle things in Philadelphia. For DeAndre Swift, not so much, right? DeAndre Swift averaged just last year right around 14 fantasy points per game and got close to 16 touches per contest. Not bad overall numbers. The matchup this week, going up against Philadelphia, they allowed right around 18 fantasy points per game to running backs last year as well, but there's no injury concerns at this moment for DeAndre Swift, which is great because it kind of feels like he's one of those guys that's banged up quite a bit because he runs so hard. He's good to go right now, and we're going to take it because the X factor number is going to be a 4. If this guy can get anywhere close to 20 touches in any contest each and every week, he's going to be one of those guys that's close to winning your matchup each and every week. He's got the pass catching upside. He could have more scoring opportunities here this year in Detroit for an offense that has more weapons than it's had in years past. I love DeAndre Swift when he's on the field. We just need the touches here. Dan Campbell, don't let us down. He's got 20 points and fallen into the start category here this week. Now we'll head over to Houston for the Texans and the Indianapolis Colts, and no question here, right? You never question whether or not you start Jonathan Taylor. The guy was borderline a perfect start for me. He's got 24 overall points. And honestly, the only reason he doesn't have a perfect 25 is because I still believe in Nyheim Hines. Do I want to start Nyheim Hines here in week 1? No, probably not. He falls in with 14 points, falling under the sit column. But Jonathan Taylor, the number 1 fantasy running back just last year, over 20 touches per game, going up against the Houston Texans, which is one of the worst run defenses in football. No injury concerns here. I love Jonathan Taylor. Once again, he was my number 1 overall running back. But like I said, Nyheim Hines is a name that I am so focused on because they could utilize him in a different way this year than we saw last year with Matt Ryan under center. The checkdowns could be a coming to Nyheim Hines, and if they do, he's going to be a weekly flex play. He's on the verge of it now. We just need to see how they handle it going forward. For the fantasy darling that is Dameon Pierce in Houston, I feel like everybody overly fell in love with him the end of the preseason here, and I get it. I like Dameon Pierce, but I'm not gonna go overboard here too early, right? When it comes to production, everything to this point hasn't been proven, right? It's a lot of assumptions when we look at Dameon Pierce. Don't, take what happened in the preseason and assume that's going to happen in week 1. A lot of the time he's probably playing in the preseason. He's playing against guys who are no longer in the league right now. Going to be a different story in a difficult matchup going up against the Indianapolis Colts, who last year were the 5th best team against opposing running backs. A very tough matchup. Overall, the offense in Houston, not overly high-powered, right? How many scoring opportunities is he going to get? I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot of lines this year with Dameon Pierce where he ends the game with right around 16 carries for 70 yards. Not going to kill you, but not going to overly win you weeks either. The X factor, maybe we're wrong. Maybe he goes out there and gets 25 touches a week. Maybe Houston's a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. But until I see it, I can't overly expect it. So he's fallen to the sit column here in week 1. Which will take us down to Miami now in South Beach for the Miami Dolphins and New England Patriots. Could be a very interesting game to pay attention to here in week 1, especially on the New England side of things with how they handle the split between Damien Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Now, I kind of expect Damien Harris to still get the bulk of the volume, even if the split's 60-40, the majority of the early down work still going the way of Damien Harris. Both of these guys could approach 12 to 15 touches per week, though. So I don't want to just sit here and say, hey, it's all Damien Harris. Stevenson's going to get the scraps because he's also going to absorb the quote-unquote James White role and some pass-catching work as well in a matchup going up against Miami, who allowed just under 18 fantasy points per game. No major injury concerns here. We know this offense overall is going to be run first once again in New England. And when it comes to X Factor, they kind of eat into each other's ceilings, right? Because they're both going to be utilized in this offense. They're both going to be productive when given touches. They're actually both going to fall into the start column for me here this week because I really think that New England tries to keep the ball away from Miami. All those high-powered assets that they have in Miami, I said assets, in Miami now, they want to keep the ball away from them. How do you do that? You run down the time of possession and you run the ball successfully. I think we see a lot of Damien Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, so they both are going to fall into the start category, even though Ramondre Stevenson just barely squeaked by. As for Chase Edmonds in Miami, the only guy I'm really looking at there as of right now, production sitting at a 2, right? A new team, a new offense, a new head coach, but do they run this offense similar to what we've seen in San Francisco? Because if they do, Chase Edmonds could be really productive for a lot of people who took him in their fantasy football drafts. Volume-wise, I do expect him to get the bulk of the touches in this backfield. Sure, Raheem Mostert going to get some touches as well. Not somebody who's been overly reliable from a health standpoint over the last few years. So the bulk of the volume still going the way of Chase Edmonds in a matchup going up against New England, who's allowed right around 17 fantasy points per game. No major injury concerns as of right now, but the scoring opportunities could be there for him in this offense this year. Some big plays, especially in the short passing game, going to make his X Factor number a 3 this week and a 16 overall, falling into the start category. Which will then take us over to the New York Jets, Baltimore Ravens, and I gotta be completely honest, I'm not overly excited about this game as a whole for the running back position. There's a lot that needs to be seen in this backfield. For the Baltimore Ravens, you got J.K. Dobbins, Kenyon Drake, Mike Davis. We really don't know what's going to happen here. J.K. Dobbins is insistent that he's 100% good to go. Film says otherwise. Coaches say otherwise. So I do expect that Kenyon Drake and Mike Davis going to have a little bit of a role to start the season here, but we don't know what that role is really going to be. The volume up in the air. The matchup is a good one. Going up against the Jets last year allowed over 20 fantasy points per game, but we really don't know who's going to get these touches. From an injury concern, a lot more for J.K. Dobbins than anyone else, right? How healthy is he coming off of that torn ACL? How much volume can he really handle? He was a very efficient running back prior to the injury. Is he going to fall into that category, at least to start the season, as somebody who needs more touches, and they kind of have to bring him along slowly? He is the best player in this backfield when he's healthy. So until we see that, yeah, sure, the X Factor number is going to be, higher for J.K. Dobbins, because if he's on the field, he gives you that big play upside, but we got to see it. All three of these guys actually fell with a 13 score, and they're all going to be a sit for me until we can see what's going on in Baltimore after this week. Same thing kind of goes for the New York Jets. We haven't really seen Breece Hall in a real-life NFL game yet that actually mattered, right? We've seen Michael Carter, and when given an opportunity, he's actually produced pretty nicely. How do they eat into each other's ceilings? By splitting the work here once again. The matchup, pretty difficult. Baltimore's defense ranked, fairly high last year, allowing only 16 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. No major injury concerns here. I have to believe that Breece Hall is going to be the guy that leads this backfield in touches each and every week. Sure, he's going to lose some pass catching work at times to Michael Carter, but we also don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback this week as of right now. Is it going to be Joe Flacco? Is it going to be Zach Wilson? And how does that really play into the mix here of how these running backs are used? I really want to see how these guys coexist. Now, when you add up all the totals, Breece Hall came up to a 15, a fringe start for me. Michael Carter, a 13, a fringe sit, right? So they're right there on the cutoff line. We need to see how they're going to handle these running backs going forward in New York before we're overly excited. Now, don't get me wrong. You probably drafted Breece Hall in a position where you want to start him. Hopefully he's your running back 3, your flex play this week, and then that's kind of something where you'll take that gamble, right? Hopefully he's not your number 1. Hopefully he's not your number 2 even, but if he is, you're going to have to cross your fingers and hope that they really give him the bulk of the carries, the bulk of the early down work, and the goal line here in New York. And now we'll go all the way over to the Washington Commandos and the Jacksonville Jaguars. For the Jags, we got Travis Etienne and James Robinson. Now, past production says that James Robinson should be good to go, but he's coming off of a torn Achilles, and that worries me, especially since they have now Travis Etienne. We haven't seen these guys on the field really together and how they're going to coexist in this backfield. Honestly, I expect Etienne to edge out James Robinson in total volume just due to the pass catching upside. I expect the Jacksonville Jaguars to be trailing quite a bit this year. And if they're trailing, they're throwing the ball. That screams to me more Travis Etienne. And he could be one of those guys that just gets those added touches from time, the bigger play upside ability going the way of Travis Etienne as well. The matchup, not overly easy. Washington allowed last year right around 17 fantasy points per game. Injury concerns, way more. For James Robinson coming off of a torn Achilles, sure, he's good to go. He's going to be active. He's going to be out there. But what's he going to be like when he really starts running the ball between the tackles? Is he still going to be explosive enough? Or are they going to have to turn, over to Travis Etienne maybe a little bit more than a lot of people expect, because the big playability definitely going the way of one Travis Etienne. He's going to be a 16 overall, a fringe start for me where J-Rob, finished with an 11. I'm just worried about the injuries. I want to see how he looks, see how they utilize him in this offense before I throw him into my starting lineup here in week 1. And then look how things have changed in Washington over the last couple weeks. None of us, myself included, really had much interest in Antonio Gibson. Then with the entire Brian Robinson situation, now we're all talking about Antonio Gibson once again. Him and J.D. McKissic as well in this backfield. When we look at the production numbers, the split is not ideal. For whatever reason, I know some of it has to do with fumbling, but we just don't see Gibson really relied upon consistently in this offense. He's continually in the doghouse. If he could just hold on to the damn ball, Gibby, and then you're going to find your way on the field more often. If he can really start hot, he'll hold off Brian Robinson when he returns from his injuries. But if he doesn't, it's just going to be Brian Robinson when he gets healthy. The matchup right now, great against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Probably one of the better things here for these guys. Jags allowed over 19 fantasy points to opposing running backs. Injury concerns, not much for either one of these guys. The X factor, though, almost non-existent. Now, we knew last year with Carson Wentz in Indianapolis that he wasn't checking down to the likes of Nyheim Hines very often. And when he passed the ball out of the backfield to Jonathan Taylor, they were more designed pass plays. I don't expect a whole lot of checkdowns from Carson Wentz here either. You got Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson on the outside. They're going to try to go down the field a little bit more. That's going to hurt J.D. McKissic. We need touchdowns, and it's always hard to count on and bank on touchdowns. Now, Antonio Gibson, being that he's probably going to be the guy getting the bulk of the volume, filling with a score of 17 and is going to be a start. J.D. McKissic, a 14, going to remain a sit for me here until we can see if they really utilize him a little bit more in the passing game. If Curtis Samuel can stay healthy, that may not happen. We need to wait and see, though, here with this Washington backfield. Now take us over to Tennessee for the New York Giants and the Tennessee Titans. Saquon Barkley against Derrick Henry, and so many people are excited about Saquon Barkley, and he's obviously going to be a start for you. But is he a smash start? I have some concerns. When it comes to production, we all know what the potential ceiling is of Saquon Barkley. We just haven't seen it in quite some time. Is the new offense, the new coaching staff going to be able to unlock Saquon Barkley? A lot of that has to do with Daniel Jones and whether or not he can move the ball down the field successfully through the air. The volume, as much as we would all love 20 plus touches, I'm kind of expecting more in that 14 to 16 range at least to start the season. The matchup, not easy. Tennessee's pretty great against opposing running backs. They have been in the past, allowing only 14 fantasy points per game just last year. Second fewest. No injury concerns as of right now for Saquon Barkley. And the X factor, you know it's going to be there with a 4. New offense, new coaching staff. Do we see more big plays? We haven't seen big play Barkley in quite some time, and that's why I have some of my concerns still a start, but going to fall right in here with a 16. For Derrick Henry, it's a perfect start, right? Production is there. When he plays, he's scoring right around 23 fantasy points per game. Volume, it's there. When he plays, over 20 touches per game. Matchup, great matchup. The Giants last year allowed over 21 fantasy points per game. No injury concerns as of right now, and the X factor is going to be there, but here is why. Last year, prior to injury, Derrick Henry was on pace for a career high in targets. If this dude starts catching passes, watch out. He's going to win you many, many, many weeks here this year. Which will then take us out to the desert, the Arizona Cardinals, Kansas City Chiefs, and honestly, when it comes to the Chiefs, I'm not interested in this backfield at all to start the season. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco, what is this split going to look like? Who's going to get the pass catching work? Because they're all capable of doing it. They're going to split so much. What's the volume going to be like? Now, at least they're all healthy. It's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because now they're all three going to be split. The X factor, honestly, in my opinion, I like Isaiah Pacheco the most out of all these guys. I just don't know if he starts with enough volume to start the season to be anywhere near fantasy viable. I want to see it before I trust it. All three of these guys fall into the sit category. For James Conner, yes. In fact, I'm going to head over to Prize Picks once again for James Conner. I'm going to smash the over because his current rushing prop is set at 46.5 rushing yards. And I love this matchup for him. The production, we saw it just last season. He averaged over 16 fantasy points per game, 6th most in the NFL. The volume was there. Saw 16 touches per game. A matchup going up against Kansas City, who allows over 17 fantasy points per game. No injury concerns as of right now, at least to him. But one thing to pay attention to and why the X factor is higher, remember, no DeAndre Hopkins, and now Zach Ertz is questionable. We could see a lot of James Conner in a game in which the Arizona Cardinals are going to have to move the football. James Conner could be one of those main assets in this offense to do that. He's definitely going to fall into the start column for me here this week. Slight road trip up the coast here to LA for the Chargers and Vegas. Now for the Vegas Raiders, you got Josh Jacobs, going to be the only guy we talk about as of right now. Production has been there, averaging right around 13 fantasy points per game, gets close to 17 touches per game when he plays as well. The matchup, not bad. Going up against the Los Angeles Chargers last year, they were the second worst defense against opposing running backs, allowing a butt ton of fantasy points. But that defense got better this offseason. They added Khalil Mack as well, so the matchup may not be a smash matchup, but still a pretty good one here on paper for Josh Jacobs. No major injury concerns. And X factor, what is a split like in this backfield? Do we see Josh Jacobs getting more of that passing work with no Kenyon Drake there? Is it going to go the way of an Amir Abdullah? We need to really pay attention because if Josh Jacobs starts catching passes, going to be another guy that you got at a great price during your fantasy draft. Still going to be a start for me here this week, though, as well. For the Los Angeles Chargers. No question here. You're starting Austin Eckler. He scored 23 out of 25 total possible points here. He averaged over 19 fantasy points per game, saw 17 touches per game. The Raiders allowed over 20 fantasy points per game last year. No major injury concerns. The only thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to look directly into the camera, don't you dare use Sony Michel this week. Don't you dare, Los Angeles Chargers. Give it to Austin Eckler. Which will then take us all the way up to Minnesota. That accent sucked. That was a horrible accent. Anyway, the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, which is going to be my Manscaped matchup of the week. Don't forget, as soon as this video is over, head over to manscaped.com. Find yourself something nice for the travel bag. It's not just ball trimmers. They got you covered with whatever it is you may need. I use a lot of the body wash, if I'm being completely honest. Use code word headliners at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. But a matchup here with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, and Dalvin Cook, three guys that I really like overall for the season. When you're looking at the Green Bay Packers side of things, obviously the production is going to be there. They both have touchdown upside each and every week, and they're going to be needed a lot in this offense. With no Davante Adams, expect a lot of volume going the way of the running backs. Both of these guys have 15 plus touch potential this week. The matchup, pretty good as well. The Minnesota Vikings, they allowed right around 20 fantasy points per game last season as well. They are a little bit better now, so I do expect that number to maybe come down slightly here in 2022, but not a horrible matchup for the Packers. No injury concerns as of right now. The X factor slightly going the way of Aaron Jones, just due to his ability to have that big play in the passing game. A small check down pass that you could take 50 yards to the house could really help boost your fantasy numbers this week, but they're both going to be starts. They both find themselves in the start column, just like Dalvin Cook is as well. An upgraded offense, a faster paced offense could lead to enhanced production for one Dalvin Cook, but the volume's going to be there, right? We've seen him get 20 plus touches a game forever when he's healthy. The matchup, somewhat difficult going up against Green Bay. They're solid against opposing running backs. Last year, they allowed right around 15.5 fantasy points per game. No injuries right now, though, to Dalvin Cook. Nothing that's going to affect him, and the X factor is always going to be there. Pass work, touchdowns, and volume. He's got that X factor and going to be a start. And now we'll go down to Big D, the Dallas Cowboys, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This one's going to be fun to watch. For Tampa Bay, you got playoff Lenny, you got Fat Lenny, whatever you want to call him. It's Leonard Fournette, who honestly, I still really like here this week. The production, we've seen it in this offense with Tom Brady. He averaged almost 16 fantasy points per game just last year in this offense. Volume, yep, 17 plus touches a week. And a matchup going up against Dallas, though, is somewhat difficult. Last year, they allowed just over 16 fantasy points per game, so not a walk in the park this week, but no main injury concerns other than the offensive line being slightly banged up. Why does that not affect Leonard Fournette a little bit more? It's his pass catching upside, it's his touchdown scoring upside, and that's why his X factor is going to be a little bit higher as well. He's a 19 overall, falling into the start column. For Dallas, you got Zeke, you got Pollard. I still have Zeke as option number one here, but similar to what we have going on in Indianapolis, I am laser focused on Tony Pollard and what he could be in this offense. I still expect Zeke to dominate the touches here, whether it's 70-30, 65-35, whatever that may be. Zeke is still going to be that option one. It's a difficult matchup for both of these guys, and really that's maybe why Tony Pollard's not a start for me this week, is because of how great the defense is for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last year allowed only 15.5 fantasy points to opposing running backs. Injury concerns, maybe a little bit more the way of Zeke. Not because of Zeke individually, but the loss of offensive lineman left tackle Tyron Smith is going to affect Zeke a lot more than it will affect Tony Pollard, and that's why Pollard still scored a 5 in this category, because a lot of his volume going to be in the passing game. The X factor going to go the way of Pollard as well because of that passing work, that big play ability. Do we see him at times in the slot, with no Michael Gallup, no Cedric Wilson, no Amari Cooper? If we can get him in the slot some more, we may really boost the overall volume and production and start starting Tony Pollard, as the weeks go on here in the season. I have high expectations this year for Tony Pollard, but in week one, he falls into the sit category. Which will take us to Monday Night Football, the first Monday Night Football game of the year. Denver Broncos, Seattle Seahawks. Couldn't be any better, right? Russell Wilson going back to Seattle. But we got some running backs to pay attention to here. We'll talk about Russ in a different video. Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon back in that backfield for the Denver Broncos. They're going to limit each other's ceilings once again. They're both going to be utilized. I do expect the bulk of the touches this year to go the way of Javonte Williams. We've even seen Melvin Gordon come out and say, hey, listen, I know he's going to be the future here. It's going to be the Javonte Williams show in the future. Melvin Gordon, though, he's still going to be sprinkled in the offense overall. It's going to be pretty good here in Denver. No major injury matchups. I do expect the bulk of the touchdown opportunities to go the way of Javonte Williams as well. Melvin Gordon, just a little bit more of an insurance policy that has a super high ceiling if anything happens to Javonte Williams. So for this week, though, Javonte Williams with 19 overall points falls into the start category. Melvin Gordon was pretty dang close, a 14, but he's going to be a sit. For Seattle, you got Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny is a roller coaster of emotions because this guy could win you your fantasy league. this guy could be hurt in quarter one, right? The production, we've seen it, but we've never seen it for a full season. This offense this year is nowhere near what it was last year with Russell Wilson, right? Because we knew that he could push the ball down the field when they needed him to Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. Is there going to be any split touches in this backfield? We really don't know. The matchup on paper, not the easiest. Denver allowed right around 17 fantasy points per game, but that defense, I still believe, is pretty underrated here this year. No major injury concerns at this time, but the X factor is there because we've seen the ceiling before with Rashad Penny. And if he gets the volume, we know the big play potential is there and the numbers could be massive. It's a lot of ifs with Rashad Penny, and that's why he only scored 16 points and barely falls into the start category here in week 1. All right, and there you have it. All the matchups for week 1 fantasy football from a start-sit perspective. Hopefully I was able to shed a little bit of light on some decisions you have in your lineup here this week. Maybe you're looking at multiple guys who all fell into the start category. Don't worry, all of our rankings are going to be out before Thursday night football. They'll drop Thursday morning, Thursday early afternoon. So if you have any late-minute decisions to make, we got you covered in time. Don't worry about that. Hopefully you enjoyed the new breakdown of all the players. If you did, don't forget, hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already, because we're going to dominate all things fantasy football in 2022, and we're looking forward to doing it with you. But for now, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. I'm going to get out of here, and we'll talk to you later.